Today we are going to go over the calendar function within GoHighLevel. I will specifically focus on the standard calendars, which means that if you are taking appointments for either a consultation or an onboarding call, or you do have a batch of people, like a set of people, you would want to put behind the calendar and equally distribute the calls between them, then this video is for you. If you are more like a beauty salon owner or something like that, where you would want to also have rooms and equipments and all kinds of different things associated to the availability of your calendar, then this video is not for you, because I will not specifically talk about those functions within GoHighLevel. It can be done, but those are going to be different types of calendars. Generally, if you are a coach, content creator, someone who has a team, info product owner or agency owner, or any type of local business where you are taking on first initial consultations or onboarding calls or sales calls or something like that, then this is going to be for you. So let's jump right in and let's go over what kind of calendars we see within GoHighLevel. Firstly, you go over to the calendar section, and it's gonna be under calendar settings. So you can also go to settings and calendar, because this is where you can create the calendars at first. I am going to show you two different types of calendars which we are going to use, and I will break down like which one is used for what purpose. But before we would do that, I would spend just a minute on showing you the preferences and availability. Up top under preferences, you can have a few default settings that make sense to just set up at first. So for example, when you are taking a look at the calendar view, which day it should start at. I know that for some people, for example, the week starts on Sunday. For other people, the week starts on Monday. So for example, for me in Europe, I mostly like using Monday. Under services, you can toggle these on, but as I mentioned in the beginning, we are not going to focus on service menu, rooms, or equipments in this video. You can also change the language. Most of the major languages are in here. Funnily enough, Hungarian is also coming soon. I believe that a lot of Hungarians are using GoHighLevel, just as myself. You can select the language, then select the time format, if it should be AM, PM, or the military time, and then which day it starts the week on. Okay, so probably up here, it's something different. Week starts on, oh no, it's the in-app preferences. And I believe this is just a web app. Anyway, you should set these two for the same, and then basically you are good to go. And then once these are done, you go up top here to availability. You select your own time zone. Note that this is going to be your own availability. If you are, for example, in, I don't know, Indonesia, then you should select Indonesia, and the account time zone can be still New York City or the West Coast, the Pacific time zone or something, but it's important that you can follow your own location, let's say, and it's much easier for you to set availability times in that case. So for example, if you just want to take calls as yourself Monday through Wednesday at, I don't know, 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. all of the days, based on, let's say you are in Australia, for example, and this is what the entire system is going to take account. Now, please note that if you are creating multiple calendars for yourself, so for example, you are also doing sales, onboarding, and checking calls. I'm just throwing in a couple of examples. The calendars itself, if it's 3 separate calendars, will also have their own availability on their own, right? The calendars themselves. If, for example, you are setting up a completely different availability on a calendar, it might not be aligned with your personal availability. In that case, no appointment is going to show, because if I set up in an onboarding call, for example, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., then it's falling out from my personal availability. So I can't be on that call, because me as a person is not available except 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. Australia time. This is very important, and in a lot of cases, if you have multiple calendars, I think what makes the most sense is just pick all of the options in and select that you are available all the time. It's going to make sense in a second. Okay, I set up incorrectly because it starts with AM and I guess PM. Right now, I'm available all day long, which is not the case, right? Because sometimes I need sleeping, but I can limit the availability on the calendar level. And I think it makes the most sense when you have multiple calendars going on. Please note that this is only relevant if on all 3 calendars, you are the only one person who is set up on, because in that case, you can set your individual needs on those each and every individual calendars. But if there is a round robin calendar and there are 4 people on that round robin calendar, those people might have different availabilities, but you would still want to cover like a wide range of times and time zones, right? So for example, if you have 4 people on an onboarding round robin calendar, those people might be in different time zones, and maybe you can cover availability all around the clock. In that case, the calendar should be the one that is wide open, and the people behind the calendar should be limited based on their availability, based on their time zone. It's really important to understand that the calendars, so the events themselves, and the people, the users in the system, are kind of 2 separate entities and can be handled like separately in terms of availability. Take that into account, like how you would wanna handle that, because, and as you just saw for a second before, there will be 2 types of calendars that we are going to use. One is personal, which belongs to one specific person, and one is round robin, which belongs to a specific function like onboarding or sales, and then multiple people are going to be behind it. This might not apply in every cases. If you have multiple people behind one calendar, just instruct the people or select the appropriate availability for the people, and then you might just open up the calendar itself to all availabilities. Really think of your use case first and then apply these modifications based on your use case. I am going to assume that there will be multiple people behind a sales calendar and an onboarding calendar. I am one of them who is going to be on that calendar. I will just say I only want to have calls on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because Monday, Friday is like other focus days. Then I just say I am based in CET time zone. I want to take calls after 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. This is also good for the United States because I am 6 hours ahead of them. In the morning, I can do focused work, and then in the like from noon till like late evening, I can or early evening, I can take calls from the US if I'm servicing the United States. If I'm servicing Europe, I'm still good because I'm up during like working hours. And then once these are done, let's go over to connections. This is a very, very important part of the puzzle. You will have to connect 2 things. First of all, you will have to connect video conferencing, and generally you will either connect Google. If you connect your Google Calendar, you can select Google Meets because it's in the same ecosystem, but mostly you will use Zoom. And so you just click connect, and then you can integrate with Lead Connector your own Zoom account. In this case, I'm not going to proceed because this account of mine is already linked in another GoHighLevel account, so I don't want to mess that up. But basically, you follow through this flow, and then once your account is connected, I show you in a second how it's going to look like. So once your Zoom account is connected, this is what you will see. And basically you are good to go. In the future, you can select Zoom as a location option in the calendars. The other important connection should be the Google Calendar that the person uses. Please note that this can be only connected one by one to the people. So for example, if you have a few team members, you could technically, as an admin of the account, change between the people, and then technically you could connect their Zoom account and their Google account, but in this case you would need to access their Google account and Zoom account. If you don't have access to that, I think it just makes sense to make a quick video about this screen and then just shoot them over where to go and then how to connect. You can just send this video over to them and then they can do the same thing and connect their Zoom and Google Calendar account. But just for you to know that you can't necessarily make this for all of your team members because you might not have access to their Google account and their Zoom account. The next thing is going to be adding your Google Calendar. You go on hitting add, connect your Google Calendar, and here you can just hit sign in with Google, and then basically you can sign in with your own Google account. And once it's going to be connected, now it jumped over to integration, so you have to go back to calendars and connections. But this is what you should see when a calendar is properly connected. Please note that when a new calendar is getting connected, generally the linked calendar is messed up. And what I mean by that is it's not automatically selecting your calendar, but it does not add events to your calendar. This is what it generally selects by default when you are connecting a new calendar. So you should see this triangle with an exclamation mark. This one is generally setting up automatically, but let's see. Okay, well, it actually is not. So you gotta come here and select. This is basically checking the conflicts. So if you have an event already scheduled in your Google Calendar, it tells GoHighLevel that a spot is reserved for something else. You can even very quickly just throw in a couple of blocking events if you have something random coming up, like you have to go get your kids all of a sudden or something. You can just put in an event and say block, and then this will communicate to GoHighLevel, and then you don't have to go into GoHighLevel and kind of select everything all over the place and change your availability if you have to just add an event in a rush, right? So you gotta select that GoHighLevel should check that specific calendar of yours, and you have to make sure that it's processed. You have to select this one, and this setting is responsible to put in new events into your calendar. And this one is responsible to check conflicts if there is an actual event already existing in your calendar. So this one is basically the checking function, and this one is basically the implementation function of the calendar. If everything is set up correctly, you should see something like this. And if you go into edit, then your actual Gmail address is selected. And if you go into check conflicts, your actual Gmail calendar is selected. So preferences, availability, and connections are done. Let's go over to the fun stuff, which is the calendars itself. So as I said before, there are two types of calendars that we are going to discuss in this video. If you hit on create calendar, it's either gonna be a personal booking or a round robin calendar. We are not going to discuss the rest. Class booking is really just one person talks to multiple people. This may be useful for webinars. Well, if you have a class booking, then generally you are just creating a Google Calendar and you invite people. I rarely see a use case where this is actually used. If you have a use case where you want to set up like multiple appointments, for example, every Friday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., there is like an onboarding session because you just onboard so many people that you want to do this in a group setting, then feel free to select this one. It's just slightly different compared to the first two, so that's fine. Collective booking, honestly, I don't see where this makes sense. And the event calendar, this one, physical events, and the service booking is the one that is really outstanding and can be considered as like a separate function. So as I said before in the beginning of the call, this can be useful for nail salons, beauty salons, or something like that, where you have multiple rooms, or even medical facilities where you have multiple rooms, multiple equipments, and you can really select like how many medical equipment or how many foam rolls, for example, if you are doing like class as a trainer, are still available, and how many foam rolls are associated to one specific room. So if that's booked, the rolls are also booked. It's a little bit more complex. I think it's kind of like a function or a service on its own within GoHighLevel, but this is really for those kind of businesses. And yeah, we are just going to discuss the personal booking and the round robin booking. And as you can see, I already created two, and I will tell you why I would use both of them if you are in the coaching info business, local services business, or online agency service business. The way I would structurize it is that I would create a personal calendar for every single person who makes calls on a regular basis. If it's a sales call or if it's an onboarding call or a mix of the two, it's always to create a personal calendar for every single people who is working in the company, because if they do have to reschedule something, they have a calendar that they can just shoot over to the person that they are trying to book a call with, right? So it makes a lot of sense if you just create a personal separately. And the other type of call is the round robin, and I would associate the more like the function to a round robin calendar. So for example, if there is a strategy session or an onboarding call or a checking call or something like that, when there are multiple people behind a certain function, so multiple salespeople, multiple VAs for an onboarding call, then I would just select round robin, because it's going to be much easier to put multiple people behind that specific function. Even if you just have like one employee doing that thing, or even if you are just yourself, it makes more sense to create a round robin, because then you cannot change it back to personal. And so I'm just going to show you this real quick. But the round robin calendar, you can add more people at any time and take away people from that calendar. While for the personal, you can only select one person and you can't give more. The interface might look the same, but if I would have one more person in this company, which is just me for a specific sub account, then it would not allow me to add multiple people, right? So that's why we do have a round robin and we do have a personal. And so the way you could structurize personal is just either Jen's calendar or consultation, or you could say strategy call, and then you could just say Peter, or you could just put the initials behind. Once you have one of these calendars configured, you can just go in and basically copy and paste for all of your team members. So you just come here, duplicate the calendar, and then change the name for John Doe, and you are good to go. And then change also the selected team member. Right. So that's for personal meetings. And for round robin, as I said, it's very, very similar. It's just that you can add more people. And since round robin is more complicated, you have advanced settings which personal calendars does not have. So for example, if an appointment gets rescheduled, then you need to know if we should keep the same appointment owner or reassign through round robin. It's very important because if someone comes in and that person is already chatting with a certain salesperson, but the person needs to reschedule, and then they might have already established some sort of relationship over chat or over something before the call, then it makes sense to just keep the same appointment owner if it needs to be rescheduled, right? These advanced settings can be really, really important at a large team, because if the leads are just being passed all around between rescheduled calls and new calls, then there is not going to be a relationship formed between a certain salesperson or an onboarding person or an account manager if the person is just thrown all over the place. And then if you have like a 20-person team or a 10-person team, then it's just so important to have a function like this where even if it's a round robin, even if it's an onboarding calendar, the lead or the customer is really getting associated with one certain team member of your company. So if it's not an issue, though, then you just keep the reassign through round robin, and then you don't have to worry about this much. But I would keep this selected at all times generally. So these are the basic differences. And so I would also create a separate round robin calendar for each function. So for example, for sales calls, onboarding calls, and such. And in case of sales calls, I think it also makes sense to create a separate round robin calendar for lead sources. So the easiest way to track this, like where leads are coming from, is creating like, for example, 3 separate round robin calendars, one for email for leads, one for organic leads, for example, and one for paid ads, let's say. And you basically would just create 3 separate funnels if those are coming through funnels. And the only difference within the funnel would be just that you switch the calendars in that funnel, right? And yeah, you can just give the name like email, or you can use the pipe sign, whichever character, whichever you like. And then you save this, go ahead and duplicate for, let's say, organic or Instagram. You can put names behind it. The people from the outside would see this, but it doesn't really matter. I see a lot of agency owners do this and just name it. The reason why it really makes sense to create a couple of calendars is because then you can use GoHighLevel's native functions to check the analytics, like which sources people are coming from, which sources people use for booking. Like if I see that in a certain month, 20 people came from email and only 3 people came from organic and 5 people came from paid ads, then I should really focus more on my email list and send out more emails because people use that channel to book a call with me, right? And then technically you can build really, really complex systems in Airtable or in spreadsheets where you can use UTM parameters. You can also use UTM parameters within GoHighLevel's form and the survey, and then basically you can hide those fields. But I think this is like the most easy to later on be able to track like where people are coming from, because you are able to filter for a specific calendar. And I think this is the most easiest to set up. And if you don't want like leads to see or customers to see where people like that there is like email or organic or something, that you can just put like an E or something like that, like an initial that is meaningful to you but not meaningful to the audience. So that's kind of like the trick that I would recommend doing. I think it's an important thing to set up, and it can help you tremendously to be able to track where people are coming from. And the way you will be able to do that is that you come over to calendars, you come to appointments, and then you can set up filters for calendars, and is any off, or is, for example, how many came from email. And this is the easiest setup to check lead sources and appointment sources where people are coming from. It's very important. All right, let's go through one of them and set these up properly. So you can see that there are a couple of subcategories in the settings of a certain calendar. And it makes sense to set up one properly. And when you duplicate them, you don't have to do that work all over again, but it's already done once. So first set up one calendar, and you have to set up one for round robin and one for personal separately, because they are not interchangeable. So that's why you should really understand when to use personal and when to use round robin, because later on you cannot interchange them. So that's why I was going very detailed into that part in this video. And so first, you upload your calendar logo if you wish to do so. Then you give a calendar name, then put a description like what this event is going to be about. Then you can select a calendar group, which I'm not going to cover in this video. I think it will be more useful to group calendars when you have a bunch of people with a bunch of calendars and a bunch of functions. I think it's at that time you will be very familiar with GoHighLevel and kind of figure out on this own. I don't want to really spend time on this group because it's not relevant for most users actually. You give a custom URL that is non-existent before, and I generally set this up in a way where I put in the contact name and I put in appointment username. And so how it would look like is that John Doe and X Peter Jen. This is how it's going to appear everywhere where the meeting invite title is shown. Okay, then we discussed in case of round robin, I generally toggle this advanced option. I select all the team members who are relevant. You can select priority. The priority is coming in play when there are multiple people on the calendar and multiple people are available in the same time slot. So if I select high priority for myself and medium or low priority for other people, it's always going to prioritize me if there are multiple users available at a certain time slot, right? And once I'm filled, I have an appointment at that time and the other people don't, it's just going to even redistribute in the next priority level, if that makes sense. And you can select your location. And so if your Zoom is linked, as mine is not linked to this account, but another one, you can select Zoom or Google Meet. So these two are going to be the most widely used, and maybe phone number if it's just a quick call through phone, but I'm going to select Google Meet at this point. And I can go over to availability. And this is the part that I was talking so much about in the previous personal availability section. So if it's a round robin, I would just keep it wide open, right? This is where I would say, okay, I'm available from midnight till midnight, almost all day, like weekdays, and let the individual people set their own availability. And so during the day, the lead or the potential customer can book at any given time, right? Because there are always people who cover that part of the day, right? And so how it would look like to the outside world is that they can basically book a call to everywhere. If you don't like the fact that you are always available and you think that kind of takes away from your status, then you can limit this, obviously. Or there is another function which can make you look busy at, 80% of the time. I think using this is a little bit of disadvantage towards your team, because this is randomly going to select times when it's going to fake that there is an appointment. So you can look more busy, let's say, and from status point of view, it gives you more credibility, right? And I would rather just select like a narrower time zone, but the availabilities or time availability, but then at least the calls would come after each other. So to my sales team, I'm not messing up their day by just randomly blocking out times for them, but actually I would just narrow it down from like 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And all of my salespeople will be available between that time. And it still looks busy because my team is not always available, but at least the calls are coming after each other. So my team can be just focused in during those 3 or 4 hours. So I think this strategy-wise is really important. And you can set recurring meeting. I rarely use these, and I rarely see people scheduling recurring meetings for onboarding calls, sales calls, or these kind of activities. And then the next part is going to be about meeting interval. It means that how often meetings should be available. So for example, at 8 a.m., 8:30, 9 a.m., 9:30. And the meeting duration, if it would be like 60 minutes, as an example, I can book at 8:30 and that would last until 9:30, but then I can't book for 8 or leads cannot book for 8 because there is no 60 minutes interval after 8, because from 8:30 there is already a booked appointment. So I think it makes sense to structure this in a way where I have 60 minutes intervals. And for example, if I have a 45-minute call, I can just make a post buffer time 15 minutes, and then this would add up to 60. And basically I can just only select at 8, 9, 10, 11, etc. Minimum scheduling notice, I call it frozen zone. I think it should be set at least 1 day prior to the call. So for example, I wouldn't be able to book like 10 minutes before the call or 23 hours before the call. I think 1 day is a comfortable starting point. And if you want to extend it or shorten it, that's up to you. And the date range, if it's a sales call, I wouldn't let it any further than 7 days. And if it's an onboarding call or something like that, maybe you can let it a little further. But then is it your best interest to get the onboarding done as soon as possible so your client can be happy? If so, then just make it like shorter, like 3, 4, even 7 days. So really you can get the ball rolling with them. Maximum booking per day. You should not put anything here. Maximum bookings per slot per user. If you can split yourself and handle 2 clients, then switch it over to 2 at the same slot. If you cannot split yourself, then select 1. I know it's a joke, just select 1 most of the times. I don't see any real use case when you can handle 2 people at the same time. So that's that. Forms and payment. I generally use the standard default form. If you want, you can build a custom form, but the way I collect custom information is generally before the booking. So if it's a sales call, the way I structure it is that I go through a survey, and then if the person qualifies, I go over to a book a call page, and then I only need to collect the basic information, and I can also bring that over from the survey. So I don't really see a reason why I should collect information here. If you don't want to do survey separately, but kind of want to build the survey questions in here, you are free to do that. You just create a form and add the custom questions, and then you just come in here and change the form to that one. So that's completely fine. You can do that. And then basically the form would be embedded into the calendar booking page. And if you want, you can pre-populate fields, for example, from a previous, like a survey fill out. And then once they are still in the same session in the browser, the information would be basically coming over here. So if in the survey I asked for their first name, last name, email, and phone, and those are the only information that I'm asking here, those are basically coming over from the survey, so they don't have to fill it out again. Please note that if you build a calendar for your internal team, so they are launching outbound calls, for example, as setters, and they are setting appointments for your own closers, then this should be toggled off. The reason is because the calendar is going to be opened in one single person's browser, and they are going to fill out with like 10 different email addresses and contact information in like an hour, because that's what they are doing, right? That's their work as a setter. And so it's just going to mess up the contacts like crazy, because their browser is going to save the very first person that they are saving. The contact ID is going to be saved for them. And then basically once you fill it out again, it's going to change the original first contact's email address, phone number, and everything. And then if they book 10 calls in the backend, in the contact list, is going to be messed up, because all the email address changes and everything is going to be really associated to one person. And it's causing a huge mess in the ecosystem. So if you are having setters and this calendar is built for a setter, make sure all times that this is turned off. It can cause like a huge issue in the system. All right, if you want a consent checkbox, toggle this on. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to allow people to add guests to the call, then you can toggle this on or off. You can feel free to do that. And then if there are payments, first you need to integrate Stripe. But if you want to accept payments, so I see this a lot for medical facilities or lawyers. If you want to conduct a call with them, even the consultation is generally paid in case of lawyers, then you are just simply integrate Stripe, add the payment option, and times, like for how long you are available, is already set up here. So if it's a 60-minute consultation and it's $150, then you are just going to set this up here, and basically you can accept payments while they are booking the calendar. The last is notifications. I really love that GoHighLevel recently changed the structure of reminder emails, cancellation emails, reschedule, follow-up emails. This is a game changer. For example, in case of the reminder, it's much more structured now in a way as Calendly does. I can basically just add like 24 hours before, 1 hour before, 5 minutes before, and it's basically sending out the same email. It's much more structured. It's much easier than setting up this whole thing in automations. So thank you, GoHighLevel. This is a big game changer, I think. And then you have a lot of flexibility here. You can send a notification to the contact, which is most widely used. You can send it to like custom emails. I don't know when it's useful to spam like a general hub, let's say, if you make like a booking at yourdomain.com, right? And then just spam all of the notifications here. I don't know if anyone would follow that. So I don't think it's like a very useful function here, or you will not use this very often. The contact, I think, is used like almost every time or every time. And then you can just send like a reminder to the assigned user, maybe like an hour before the call, so they just get extra notified. You can also select email and in-app. So you can also send push notifications if the Lead Connector app is downloaded to your or your salespeople's phone. And basically it would just come up as a push notification. I think this is useful. The email is useful. So you can notify the assigned user like an hour before the call. So that's that. And allow Google Calendar to send invitation to update emails. Extremely useful. Like if your Google Calendar is linked, then once someone books a call, it sends out an invitation right away and it appears in the calendar. So always check this if the Google Calendar is connected, because this is super useful. And then assign contacts to their representative calendar team members each time the appointment is booked. So this should be turned on, because if the contact is not assigned to a user, this will assign the contact to a user. But I would also consider to select skip assigning contacts that are already assigned. So this is something very similar that we were setting up at the meeting details at the advanced settings, is that if someone is already associated with a user, with a colleague of yours, then letting them again go all over the place is not going to help anybody. So always make sure, I think, if it's to keep this checked in, except if you have a specific use case where it would make more sense to just go and reassign to new people, right? So make sure to check that. If you want to implement like a cancellation reschedule policy, and the rescheduling link would be expiring before a certain time of the call, I wouldn't set this up, honestly. I mean, I would set this up like the reschedule and the cancellation, but I wouldn't put like an expiration date on it. If someone wants to cancel a call, they will just not show up, right? So you can limit this, but I think the brand and the communication and the respect towards you as the user is the thing that is going to make sure that they will show up, or they will shoot you an email that, hey, I really need to reschedule or something. I think limiting this is just adding extra complexity for you, because if they have something come up, like something happened to their kids in the school, they will just leave, right? And then if you are just making them harder to reschedule, they might not just shoot you an email that, hey, I can't come. That's it. And yeah. But if they have a rescheduling that is always open, they at least can try to reschedule. So I think this one is not that useful. If based on your experience, based on hundreds of calls, it makes sense for you to try this, or you kind of feel like that this can be a useful function, then go ahead. But as long as you don't have data, I wouldn't limit or make the link expire. Well, and the last section of it is customization. Calendar cover image, if you want to set this up to make it more personalized. Calendar widget style, classic or neo. I always use it on neo. I don't think it has a lot of importance, honestly. And maybe the colors, you can change the colors to your brand colors. This is pretty useful. And calendar description, calendar title. Yeah, and what should be on the button text. I'm gonna show you this real quick, how it's gonna look like, but you can customize that. So for example, as you can see, it's blue. And there is a schedule meeting button. You can customize this one. The form, this is the default form that we were talking about before. I think this is a pretty good looking calendar. I would not change a lot, like maximum the color. If I would wanna make it look and fit my my funnel and the colors in my funnel, then obviously I would change the color, but I would keep everything as is. So we are pretty much actually set up with our calendar. And once we did that, we can easily duplicate and make one very similar, for example, from sales to onboarding, or from sales email source to sales paid ad source, for example. It's pretty easy from now on moving forward. And then one more important part is how you can implement it. So if you are building a funnel in GoHighLevel, you will be just very easily be able to put in a widget for calendar, and you can select this specific calendar into the funnel. If you are having a WordPress website or any other platform you are using for the website building, you can simply just come in here, take the embedded iframe script, and then just copy over and implement it in the website, and it's going to look exactly the same as it would look in a GoHighLevel funnel. A one-time link, you can generate a one-time link if you don't want that person to rebook with you very frequently or know your URL. I yet to see a use case where this is useful, but yeah, just keep in mind that it's possible. And what's more important is that you remember that we have selected a URL for that specific calendar, right? When we were adjusting the calendar. So test round robin, Peter, this is what I selected. The reason why we also have a permanent link is that it is a identifier link. So what do I mean by that? As long as this calendar exists, this is going to be the calendar's identifier link, which means it's never going to change. The reason why it's very important is that if we used this permanent link, so for example, you are putting the link behind a click here button or something like that, and it's in a lot of different template emails, it makes much more sense to use the permanent link because it's not seen at all, like what's the actual link. Because it's behind the button or behind a certain text as a link. But if I change the URL, because I can change this anytime, then I have to take the URL and change it every single email where I have ever used that, right? So I think it makes more sense to use the permanent link in like templates, because if I have 100 different emails, the email templates where this calendar is used, then I have to change in 100 different emails. So I think it's much more easy to use the permanent link in places where the link is not shown at all. If you want the link to be nice or the URL to be nice, then obviously you can just use this one. If you are sending this over to someone in a Instagram conversation or in a text message conversation or something like that, then you can use this one, and you can use this one where the link is hidden, and it doesn't really matter if it's just the code. And one last thing before we close up this video, you might ask, can you actually brand this api.leadconnectorhq.com to your own brand? The answer is yes, you can. The way you can do that is that you come over to business profile and you have this section called branded domain. And basically, if you are setting up like a booking dot or API dot over by systems.com and you add this, you can just add that CNAME record to your DNS records. And from that point onwards, you can use these branded domains instead of the default one that GoHighLevel set up for you. So that's about it for calendars. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.